we already studied Daniel chapter 1, and we were starting Daniel chapter 2. And as we were saying, Daniel chapter 2 is an extremely pivotal and foundational prophecy. When I say pivotal, I mean it's a prophecy that other prophecies are built upon. And I say foundational, what I mean is foundational to belief, to prophetic belief in general in the Bible. Then the prophecy of Daniel chapter 2 and the vision that Daniel received in Daniel chapter 2 is extremely foundational. So that if a person were to, by the grace of the Most High, understand Daniel chapter 2 and understand this prophetic vision, it will keep that person going forward in other prophetic visions all the way through to Revelation. So that's why when we started studying Daniel 2 last week, I stopped at this point because as Daniel gets ready to interpret the vision, it's real important that we understand this foundationally going forward, because it's like I said, it's a very foundational and pivotal vision. And so people that get this incorrectly, for example, I've in times past, I've studied with Jehovah's Witnesses and studied their belief in Daniel 2, and it is so perverted that you can understand how they have no concept of prophecy. And the thing is that, and as we mentioned before, as we studied the prophecy of Revelation, if a person or persons or denomination does not understand the prophets of the broken, what I call the broken covenant, the so-called Old Testament, if a person does not understand the prophets, they will not understand the Revelation. They will not get it at all. Any person that would form or frame the opinion that the Ten Commandment covenant of the Most High is somehow done away with will never understand Revelation. You're just not going to get it, because it's based in the covenant, okay, which is commonly termed the Ten Commandments, and it's based in the prophets. And let me explain. I had a sister ask me a question this week. The question was, why is the New Testament written in Greek and not Hebrew? That was a good question. She said, why? She asked, why is the New Testament written in Greek and not Hebrew? And the answer I gave her was that the New Testament is mostly made up of epistles or letters. And those epistles or letters were in large part written to Gentile converts. Although there were times, like in the book of Romans and in the book of Hebrews, of course, it was written to Hebrews directly. But in the book of Revelation, most of the time, the epistles of the renewed covenant, so-called New Testament, was written to Gentile converts. And the common language of the Gentile at that time, the 1st century AD, was Greek. Those letters were written in Greek. Even sometimes they were not written by the apostles themselves, but people that knew Greek were translating from the apostles to the from Hebrew to the Greek for the people that were receiving the letters. The reason I bring that up is to say, if they were writing these letters to Gentile converts, what about the people that were already Hebrew, that already were received the Messiah, and they were already Hebrew? Well, we have to understand that the people that were already Hebrew and the people that were Gentile converts had a Bible. The Bible they had is what we call the Old Testament. That was the Bible. See, that's what they had. And these epistles were just basically expounding on the Messiah's role and the fact that, of course, he had returned and he had come to the earth and died for the sins of his people. And so the epistles were expounding on, as we talked about last week, the doctrine of justification by faith, which is in the broken covenant, or the so-called Old Testament. It's in there, but it was being expounded upon in the epistles of the New Testament. So the Old Testament is the Bible originally. That's why when you look at the size of the King James Bible, you have, basically more than, I'd say, 3/4 of the Bible is the so-called Old Testament or broken covenant, and only about 1/4 of the Bible is the New Testament, as far as the size of the Bible in terms of the amount of writing that is done. Because most of the instructions are what we call the Old Testament. So then, if in today's religion, with regard to the Bible, most denominations, whether they are Sabbath-keeping denominations or not, they do not, by and large, do a lot of study of the broken covenant or the Old Testament. They don't do a lot of study there, and because of that, they will never understand the book of Revelation. Okay, and so here in Daniel 2 is a foundational vision that, if properly understood, will help a person understand many things going forward. Okay, many things going forward. Daniel, and the prophecy of Daniel is similar to the prophecy of Ezekiel or in Jeremiah and Isaiah, in the sense that the Most High in Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Isaiah and Zechariah as well, he repeats the same information to his prophet in different ways. Okay, and a lot of people don't understand that concept, and he does it in Revelation. And let's use, since we just studied the book of Revelation, let's understand by using the book of Revelation. In the book of Revelation, there are 7 churches, there are 7 seals, and there are 7 trumpets, and they all cover the same 7 time periods. Okay, but they're just, the time periods are being illustrated to the prophet in 3 different ways. All right, and in each way, there's information revealed that's not revealed in the other 2 ways. That is a typical thing in terms of prophecy. Isaiah, the same thing is in Isaiah, the same thing is in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, as I mentioned, and in Zechariah, and it's here also in the book of Daniel. So in Daniel, you have Daniel receiving a vision, and then he's going to receive other visions that are based on the same vision, but he's going to be receiving different information each time and building on the information. So Daniel 2 is basically the same as Daniel 7, is similar to Daniel 8. Okay, very similar, because he's telling Daniel the same thing and giving him different details in each time. Okay, and we'll see that as we study. But Daniel 2 is the foundation. So now, let's just review what we already studied in Daniel 2, when we studied that Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon. And Babylon had overtaken all the kingdoms of the then known world, which today we would call the so-called Middle East. They didn't have a term Middle East at that time, but Nebuchadnezzar controlled, his kingdom controlled land from Africa through what we would consider today the Middle East, all the way north into what we would have today as Iraq and Iran and Turkey, all the way down to Saudi Arabia and as far west as India. He had a huge kingdom. The ancient Babylonian kingdom was a huge kingdom. Okay, and as part of that kingdom, he overthrew Israel and he destroyed the city of Jerusalem and the temple, and he took the instruments from the temple and brought it to Babylon. He had captives that he took from Jerusalem of the tribe of Judah. Basically, the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, or Levi, as some people know him, the priesthood, were taken captive. Not all of them, but some of them that he had chosen. Among these were Daniel, Mishael, Azariah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They were people that were of the royal seed of Judah that were chosen to be trained in the court of Babylon to serve Babylon as Babylonians. Okay, because Nebuchadnezzar never intended, as no king ever intends, for his kingdom to end. They never intend for their kingdoms to end, not on the earth. But we know that there's only one kingdom that will never end. It's the kingdom of Yahushua, Mashiach, who has already been sent from Father Yah, and he will come back and take this earth, and his kingdom, as the Bible will show us, will never end. But every earthly kingdom will come to an end. But Nebuchadnezzar never intended that for his kingdom, so he was planning his kingdom to continue. So he had taken people from different countries, among them from Judah, and he was going to teach them. He changed their names. The captives' names were changed to Babylonian names, and he intended that they should learn the tongue or the language of the Babylonians and the ways and the worship style of the Babylonians, and that they should serve in Babylon. So here, this Nebuchadnezzar, this king, had a dream, and the dream bothered him, so that he woke out of his sleep. Problem was, he knew the dream was important, but he forgot what the dream was. So he called his Babylonian wise men, not only to interpret his dream, but to tell him exactly what he dreamt. Of course, they could not do that. Somebody's telling you, I want you to tell me what I dreamt last night, and then I want you to tell me what I dreamt meant. They could not do that. And he was not known for his patience. Most kings are not known for their patience, and Nebuchadnezzar was an extreme in that way. So he was going to order all the wise men of Babylon to be killed, to be destroyed, as a result of these not being able to tell him what he dreamt and what it meant. And when Daniel was told about this, Daniel requested time that he might approach the Most High, and he and his three brothers, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, might pray to the Most High, and that the Most High might reveal this thing to them. And of course, they were given the time, and in night visions, Daniel received the dream, and he received the interpretation. Then Daniel was brought into the king, and Daniel is going to explain to the king what he dreamt and what it means. And this is where we are today. We're going to start in Daniel chapter 2. We're going to start at verse 24 and read from verse 24 down to verse 28. And this is just, again, the last part of the review, Daniel chapter 2, from verse 24 to 28, what we read in part 1 of this study. Therefore Daniel went in unto Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went in and said thus unto him, Destroy not the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show unto the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah that will make known unto the king the interpretation. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, Art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, The secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers show unto the king. But there is a Most High in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. So now Daniel saves all the lives of the wise men of Babylon. Then after he does that, the captain of the guard brings Daniel in quickly, because this was extremely important to Nebuchadnezzar. Though Nebuchadnezzar was not a patient man, Nebuchadnezzar was a spiritual man. He was really was, as you study his story, and if you read some of the other things about him that were written, say, in the book of Ezekiel and Isaiah, you can tell he was a spiritual man, to the point that the Most High called Nebuchadnezzar his servant. Although Nebuchadnezzar didn't know him, he called Nebuchadnezzar his servant. And of course, later in this book of Daniel, we're going to see Nebuchadnezzar will become, in actual fact, a servant of the Most High Yah. We'll read about that. But right now is the beginning of his journey. And so here Daniel tells the king that there is a Most High, because there was a lot of different gods in Babylon, just like there was in ancient Egypt in the time of Moses. There's a lot of different gods they served in Babylon. The sun god, the moon god, gods of the stars. That's why they had astrologers with psychic stuff and astrology and what do you call it, astrological signs like people follow today. There's a lot of those things in Babylon, but Daniel wanted to make sure Nebuchadnezzar understood, above all of the other gods that you worship, there is one Most High, Allah, Yah, in heaven, and he is the one that shows you. And notice he told Daniel told him that that the Most High makes known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Whenever the Bible talks about the latter days, you can safely understand they're talking about our time. You and I are in the latter days. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar received a dream over, I'd say, 3,000 years ago, 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. And the dream stretched all the way till today. Okay, that's powerful. If you think about that, that's powerful. So now Daniel's going to reveal to Nebuchadnezzar the dream. And let's look at that. Daniel chapter 2. I just want to stop at verse 29 and 30 for right now. Verse 29 and 30 of Daniel chapter 2. The prophecy says, "As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter? And he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king, that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart." Let's stop here. First, Daniel, not only was revealed to Daniel by the Most High what Nebuchadnezzar dreamt, it was revealed to Daniel what Nebuchadnezzar was thinking before he fell asleep. Apparently, Nebuchadnezzar was thinking about prophecy. He was thinking about what should happen in the hereafter. What happens after I die? What happens in the future? That's what Nebuchadnezzar was thinking when he was in his bed before he fell asleep. Okay, that's point one on this part here. So Nebuchadnezzar was told what he was thinking. That's powerful. Because the Most High knows what we're thinking at all times. So, but to a pagan man like Nebuchadnezzar, that's not something he understands. But now he does, because Daniel is telling him what he thought, what he was thinking about before he fell asleep, what should come to pass hereafter. Secondly, Daniel is in Babylon. Okay, Daniel is a Hebrew in Babylon. Daniel is a Hebrew captive in Babylon. Daniel didn't voluntarily go to Babylon. He was taken there. His city and his nation was overrun and destroyed by the Babylonians because of their idolatrous ways and for breaking the covenant of the Most High over a long period of time. Daniel was a captive in Babylon. Daniel worked for Nebuchadnezzar, and Daniel was a Hebrew. Daniel was faithful to what he knew to be the truth from his Hebrew upbringing. I bring that out to say again, as we talked about when we started this study in the prophecy of Daniel in chapter 1, Daniel is a good example for the Hebrew today to understand how to live in the kingdom of Babylon, the modern kingdom of Babylon that we are in 2016, as Revelation calls the situation in these last days being run by a great whore that has on her forehead mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. And so the Bible and Revelation talks about these last days as being also Babylon in spirit. How should we as Hebrews live in Babylon today? So Daniel worked not only in Babylon, he worked for the government in Babylon, because he worked directly for Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. Daniel could not flee to any rural area. Daniel could not escape and be self-supporting, as people try to do here today. So Daniel was in the midst of Babylon, and Daniel was faithful to the Most High, a faithful prophet. So we need to see Daniel, and an example of Daniel in his situation, so that we can understand how we are to handle ourselves. Well, so far we see that Daniel gives all praise to the Most High Yah. He tells Nebuchadnezzar that he's not any different than any other person, but that there's a Most High in heaven, and he's pointing the king to the Most High. Okay, he's pointing the king to the Most High. He's not taking, this is a very important vision, and Nebuchadnezzar was going to kill everybody if he didn't get it. And so Daniel was going to be made a very great man, as Nebuchadnezzar said, whoever is able to tell me the dream and the vision, I will make him a great man, is what he told his people. He said, I'll make him a great man. I'll give him many gifts and honor and reward. Daniel didn't care about all that. Okay, Daniel was telling him, I'm just a man. I serve the Most High, and I'm here to give you this dream. Okay, very humble, very, very humble man, faithful in everything that he did in Babylon. It's a good example for us. Okay, Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2. And of course, I just want to bring this out. He never compromised the principles he was taught. We saw that in Daniel 1. He didn't compromise in his diet. He didn't compromise in the Shabbat. He didn't compromise in the covenant. Now, I just want to bring this out. This is important too. They could not keep any feasts in Babylon, because the Bible showed us when we studied the book of Deuteronomy, if you recall, the feasts could only be kept in Jerusalem, and they could only be kept in Jerusalem when the covenant of the Most High was in the most holy place of the sanctuary in Jerusalem. Okay, that's the only time they could keep a feast. So in Babylon, you will never read about the Hebrews keeping a feast, not in Daniel. You don't read about it in Esther when they were in Persian kingdom, because you can't keep a feast. The three appointed feasts, which is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Pentecost, and the Feast of the Tabernacle. You cannot keep these feasts outside of Jerusalem. Okay? So you can't keep the feast, but you can obey the covenant wherever you are. The covenant between the Most High and his people, commonly referred to as the Ten Commandments, is a personal responsibility of every Hebrew who has a relationship with the Most High. And so Daniel was in Babylon. He was going to be obedient to the covenant, as we're going to see. So were his three brothers, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, as they will prove in Daniel chapter 3. He was obedient to the laws of diet, of what he should eat. Very important that your mind and you be clear and your body be strong when you're a captive in a foreign land. Does that make sense, brothers and sisters? Very important that your mind be clear, that you don't get caught up in thinking you're a Babylonian when you're a Hebrew. See, that's the mistake that the Egyptians, that the Israelites made when they were in Egypt, as it showed us in Ezekiel chapter 20 and 21 and 22. The Israelites, over the 4 centuries they were in Egypt, they started to think they were Egyptians, started to worship like Egyptians, started to worship Egyptian gods. The Most High had to correct them in that. Okay, had to correct them in that. So they were to keep the covenant of the Most High even in Egypt. But as the Most High through Moses told Pharaoh, let my people go, he said, that they may keep a feast to me in the wilderness. They could not keep the feast in Egypt. Okay, same thing. Daniel could not keep the feast. Hebrews cannot keep feasts outside of Jerusalem. Okay, can't do it. But we can keep the covenant everywhere we go. It's a personal responsibility between the Most High and the children of Israel forever. Okay, let us continue Daniel chapter 2. Now Daniel will get into the dream itself. Daniel chapter 2 from verse 31 down to verse down to verse 35. Daniel chapter 2 from verse 31 down to verse 35. Let us read this very carefully. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. The image's head was of fine gold, his breasts and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest so that a stone was cut without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Let's stop right here. So Nebuchadnezzar dreamed, and Daniel also apparently saw it, a great image of a man. And the image was made out of 4 different metals. Top part, the head was made of gold. The breast and arms were silver. The thighs of brass. The legs of iron. And then the feet were part of the iron and part of the clay. Daniel saw and told Nebuchadnezzar that a stone was cut out without hands. In other words, it was not man that brought this stone. The stone smote the image in the feet. And if you can imagine a stone or a giant boulder hitting a great image or a statue in its feet, of course, if it did that, it would cause the collapse of the entire statue. This is what Daniel showed Nebuchadnezzar that his dream was about. So the stone smoked or smashed the image in the feet, and then the Bible shows us that the whole thing, the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold, were broken to pieces together and became like chaff. So it collapsed and turned into like dust. Okay? And was blown away. The wind just blew them away. So those those metals of the statue and the statue itself was destroyed and blown away. Okay? And the stone that smote the image turned from a boulder into a great mountain. And the mountain filled up the entire earth. What a dream. What a dream. So now Daniel gives Nebuchadnezzar the dream, and you can imagine Nebuchadnezzar is probably in a state of shock right now. This young man told him what he was thinking before he fell asleep, and now it clearly shows him the dream that he had. Nebuchadnezzar obviously is in shock, and he would be intrigued right now, extremely intrigued at what this means. So let's look and see what Daniel tells us, what the Most High through Daniel tells us, what this vision means. Daniel chapter 2, we're going to read from verse 36. I'm going to break this in pieces. We're going to read from verse 36 down to verse 40. Okay? Verse 36 down to verse 40, the interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom power and strength and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the air, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. After thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and a third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, it shall break in pieces and bruise. So let's stop right here for a minute. So now, the interpretation. King Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, represented the head of gold. There are some that incorrectly state that this is Iraq. Let's safely put that to bed. Iraq is not a world kingdom in 2016. Iraq is not a world kingdom in 2016. Okay? Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom at the time of his life was a world kingdom. And he told Nebuchadnezzar, that is Daniel, thou, Nebuchadnezzar, your kingdom is the head of gold. Then he began to say things to Nebuchadnezzar that Nebuchadnezzar did not like, as we're going to see in Daniel chapter 3 and 4. Nebuchadnezzar did not like the things that Daniel was next going to say, and yet he respected them. But Daniel told him that after the Babylonian kingdom, there would arise another kingdom that was inferior to his Babylonian kingdom, that is represented as silver, just as gold is of more value than silver. And then he said that there would be a third kingdom of brass. And then he said there would be a fourth kingdom of iron. And if you notice, the metals are devaluing. You have gold, then silver, then brass, and finally iron, right? So you have four kingdoms that succeed each other, and they are devalued. In other words, they are not as nice, they are not as valued as the previous one. It gets worse. So the kingdoms that succeed Nebuchadnezzar become worse kingdoms than his kingdom. His kingdom is the best of them. The rest of them get worse after that. Okay? So you have four kingdoms or four governments. That's right, Sister Elaine. There are four different governments or kingdoms on the earth. Remember that, four. Okay? Now, let me just stop here and say this. Over the course of millennia, like thousands of years, there have been many, many, many kingdoms. I think we can all agree there's been Chinese dynasties, right? There have been Chinese dynasties. There have been kingdoms in India. There have been kingdoms in places that we now call Africa and South America and Central America and Mexico. There were nations, there were more than 500 nations in the land that we call North America. So there have been kingdoms all over the earth for a long time. But the Most High focuses our attention on four kingdoms. He doesn't focus on all the other ones that have been around for many years. He focuses on these four. And these four become the basis of prophecy going forward. Okay? I just want y'all to understand that. There have been many kingdoms. The United States is a government and a kingdom, a very powerful one. The most powerful government and kingdom in the modern age is the United States of America. And yet, it's not one of these four. Okay? So let us look at these kingdoms. Let's continue. Excuse me. Excuse me. Daniel chapter 2. Let's look at verse 41, 42, Actually, let's look at from verse 41. Thank you, Sister Lane. Down to verse 44. Daniel chapter 2, from verse 41 down to verse 44. The prophecy reads, "And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom," that is the fourth one, "the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron. For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever." Here's the first reference in Daniel of the Most High's kingdom that will stand forever. You're going to see other references to that in the book of Daniel, but this is the first one. So here is the first reference where he's telling Nebuchadnezzar, the Most High, the God of heaven that gave me your dream and showed me the interpretation, he's going to set up a kingdom, never be destroyed. It's not going to be left to other people. It's going to stand forever. Okay? And he tells Nebuchadnezzar that the iron is the fourth kingdom. We saw that. And that the toes were part of iron and part of clay. And then he shows him that when it's destroyed, the Most High is going to set up a kingdom that's going to last forever. Now, these kingdoms we have shown, I'm going to ask you a question right now, help you understand this a little bit. These kingdoms that are shown start off with the head of gold. Do you see that? Testing 1, 2, 3. Do you see that it starts off with the head of gold? Do you see that? Okay. Do you see that the kingdoms are successive? Gold, silver, bronze, iron. Do you see that they are successive kingdoms, that they one come after another? Okay. There are four of them, and they're one after another. You guys see that? I want to make sure. Okay, it's important. Do you see that the iron, the kingdom that represents the iron, goes from the legs all the way into the feet? Although in the feet is part iron and part clay, you still see it says that in it at the end is the strength of the iron all the way at the end. Do you see that? Testing 1, 2, 3. I want to make sure. So at the time that this kingdom is destroyed, the iron is running things. At the end, it's the iron that's there. Do you guys see that? So it starts off with gold, but at the end, it's iron. Right? So at the time that the Most High sets up his eternal kingdom, it is the iron that's going to be around. It's the iron that's going to be on the earth ruling things. All right? Okay? So when we discover who the iron is, we're going to know who rules things all the way to 2016 and until the Messiah returns and establishes his kingdom. You all understand that? I want to make sure you get that because it's important. So whoever is the iron is ruling things in 2016. Somebody say, well, it must be the United States. Nope. Going to be able to see all of those kingdoms in this same Bible. They're all going to be shown in the Bible, all four of them. And the fourth one actually controls the United States of America. And we'll be understanding that going forward when we understand the four kingdoms. But I just want you to see, just based on this statute, that the fourth kingdom is going to be around when the Most High sets up his kingdom. And that whatever the iron represents is that fourth kingdom. And that's the kingdom that's ruling the earth right now. Okay, I just want y'all to understand that. Because this goes all the way to the end. Okay, this goes all the way to the end. Okay. Now, verse 45. Daniel chapter 2. I'm going to start at verse 44 again and read verse 45. Daniel 2, verse 44 and 45. That's why I said this is a very pivotal vision. Daniel 2, verse 44 and 45. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, and the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. So he's making sure Nebuchadnezzar understands. This is what he was thinking about. He was thinking about what should happen in the last days. What happens in the next life? What is going to be the future of this earth? He's being shown. Okay? He said the dream is certain. And this interpretation I'm giving you is solid. He's telling him this is solid. There's no arguing about this interpretation. It's solid. So he tells him that the Most High is going to set up a kingdom that stands forever. And then he tells him that the stone that was cut out of the mountain without hands, that broke in pieces, the statue, is a representation of the kingdom that's going to stand forever. Well, brothers and sisters, we don't, and a lot of people, I mean, they say all kinds of things about the stone. It's kind of silly, really. But when you look at the rest of the Bible, there's only one kingdom that's going to be upon the earth that the Bible talks about. You guys know what I'm talking about? There's only one kingdom that the Bible talks about that's going to be on this earth forever. There's only one. It is the kingdom of the Messiah. It is what the Messiah was talking about constantly when he was on the earth. He says that he told his 12 disciples, you shall be on 12 thrones in the kingdom, he said, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. You remember what the thief on the cross, the Hebrew on the cross said? He said, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Didn't he say that? So Messiah is going to set up a kingdom on this earth. And it's going to stand forever. So obviously the stone is the representation of the Messiah's kingdom. The only way you don't get that is if you somehow decide that there's no Messiah. That's the only way you get something different. And I've heard people come up with different stuff, and it's always some sort of attack or some sort of slight on the Messiah and on his role in things on the earth. But the Messiah is his kingdom that's going to be forever. The Father has ordained that the Messiah is going to have an eternal kingdom. That's what heaven is all about. The root and the offspring of David. So like I said, this dream of Daniel 2 is foundational. So you understand going forward a lot of things. You understand that the iron, which we're going to talk about in a minute, who's representing, the iron is what's in charge in 2016. You may not know it, you may not see it, but it's in charge. The Bible is telling us that. Because you don't see it because it's mixed with miry clay. It's mixed with miry clay. But he said, even though it's mixed with miry clay, Daniel told him in it is the strength of the iron. Okay? The strength of the iron is behind it. Let's look at the rest of the chapter, then we'll go into the four kingdoms. Daniel chapter 2, from verse 46 to verse 49. Daniel chapter 2, from verse 46 to verse 49. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. The king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your Elohim is an Elohim of Elohims, and Adonai of kings, Adonai Amalek, and a revealer of secrets, seeing that thou couldst reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man, and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the king. So he promoted Daniel after that. And he did like all heathen do. See, brothers and sisters, we know Satan's main doctrine that he taught Adam and Eve is that man can be a god. And all the religions of the earth had that as their central theme, that man could be a god. And so we end up worshiping people. Yeah, we have a lot of gods on planet Earth: money, power, sex, images of different sorts, statues. But really, the greatest gods we have on planet Earth are people. We worship people, celebrities, so-called stars. Isn't that right? That's why we give them the name or the title of star. This person is a star because it's an object of worship. Okay, it's an object of worship. Whether it be, and usually the people that we call stars that we worship are generally, is entertainers. Really what they are is entertainers, because what they do is they sing for us, they dance for us, they act for us, they play for us, or they preach for us. And we call them stars, yes. And they're just entertaining us is what they're doing, okay? They're not really stars to the Most High, but we make them so. We call them that. We call them stars. And so, brothers and sisters, Nebuchadnezzar was no different. Daniel, to him, was a star. Okay, Daniel was a star. And so he bowed immediately and worshiped Daniel, and they offered odors to him. See, that's what they did that's what they do. Isn't that like in the Catholic Church, they burn incense to their statue? They do that. The Israelites burned incense to the Most High, the living God, the only true God. Yeah, they burned incense to him, and they burned the incense only the Levites were to burn the incense, and only a certain sect of them, and they burned it in the sanctuary. Incense. Okay? All the other fake religions do whatever they do, but there's only one God. There's only one true Most High Yah. There's not two. There's only one. So the Israelites know who he is, but the heathen will make any man or any person that overwhelms them a god. They do that. So Nebuchadnezzar did what is natural to every heathen. He bowed to Daniel. And he kept his promise, and he made Daniel a great man. And Daniel, being wise, being a servant of the Most High, knows that he needs help. So he calls his buddies. He tells the king, I need my buddies with me. If you're going to promote me, I need my boys with me. So Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are brought in also. Okay. Now, he is a wealthy man now. Daniel's a wealthy man, but that wealth is not going to go to his head. That is not going to go to his head. You see, today, people have entire churches filled with individuals that are just lusting to get rich in this world's goods. I mean, they would play lotto, they would do whatever. If you told any individual in these churches, and it happens all the time. If you take a person that's in a choir, many of the greatest worldly singers that we have that ever existed on planet Earth started off in church choirs. And when they're offered a lot of money to come into the world and sing for the world, they leave their churches quick and they go and get that money. And a lot of times today, the pastors, well, they're happy because that means they can pay tithe back to the church. So go get that money, bring that tithe back here, sister or brother, right? They could be doing anything in the movies. If they're making a lot of money, then they have to, they can go do that. So they could be sitting where we're sitting, like we're sitting right here, right now, talking about following the Most High, obeying his covenant. But if Satan comes and knocks on their door and makes them a deal, all these things will I give you if you bow down and worship me, he told the Messiah. People will take that deal in a heartbeat. The Messiah said, no, get lost. I'm only worshiping the Most High. I don't need nothing you got. But today, people will take that deal. They'll take that deal every time. And they will worship the devil. And they'll say, God knows my heart. They'll take that deal every time. Whether it be to play some sort of sport and get paid millions of dollars, or to sing, or to dance, or to act, whatever the devil wants. They will do it if they're being paid. The devil knows that. He knows that. And he keeps getting people with that deal. I tell you who he will not get. He will not get the 144,000. He will not get them. Because to the 144,000, the spirit of the Most High Yah and faithfulness to him and his spirit is more important than any stack of Federal Reserve notes the devil can give them. It's more important than any amount of mansions, cars, fame that the devil can show them. It's more important than being famous. It's more important than being rich. It's more important than any of that. The spirit of the Most High. You see, because let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. You cannot stack up Federal Reserve notes and have the spirit of the Most High at the same time. Impossible. See, people jump at it in a second. I don't care if somebody offered you $10 million today to sleep with somebody else's husband or wife, you would do it. Most people would do it. They would do it. If somebody said, look, I'm going to open a bank account for you, and we're going to place $100 million in this bank account if you have sex with this person. And it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man. They said, you're going to have sex with this person or these two people. We'll give you $100 million. People will rationalize that and say, you know how much help, how much work, how much I could do for the Lord? You know how much I could do for the Lord? Brothers and sisters, to the Most High servants, obedience to the covenant is paramount. There is nothing that Satan could give to cause the obedient servants, the Hebrew Israelites of the Most High, to break the covenant. As we're going to see with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah as the example. And as we're going to see in these last days, as the Bible shows us in the book of Revelation, you can't induce the servants of the Most High with these worldly gifts. So Daniel was thrust into the spotlight, and he became a big man in the government of Babylon, and he became an important man. Okay, so let's talk about the 4 kingdoms. We already know the first one. Let me just test you to make sure you're paying attention. What is the first kingdom that's the head of gold? Can you tell me? What's the first kingdom that's the head of gold? Can you tell me? The Bible will show us, well, it already did. Daniel told us in Daniel chapter 2. It's Babylon. Do you see that? Let's look at this. Daniel chapter 2. Notice verse 37 and 38. Daniel chapter 2, verse 37 and 38. Okay, everything we got to back up with the Bible. Notice what it says. Thou, O king, art a king of kings. For the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. Do you see that? Nebuchadnezzar, thou art this head of gold. So we see the Babylonian kingdom is the head of gold. Okay? So now, what does the Bible tell us is the kingdom that came on the back, on the heels of Babylon? Let's take a look at that. And let's go ahead a little bit to Daniel chapter 5. Daniel chapter 5. And we're going to see it, the kingdom of Babylon in the hands of the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar. Okay? Belshazzar. Daniel chapter 5, from verse 1 down to verse 3. We're not going to read the whole 5. I just want to show you the next kingdom. Daniel chapter 5, from verse 1 to verse 3. Notice what came next. Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. And they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of Yah, which was at Jerusalem. And the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank. So the Babylon kingdom at that time was ruled by a man named Belshazzar. It says son, his father was Nebuchadnezzar. Really, when you look at the interpretation, it is his grandfather. Nebuchadnezzar had a son named Evil Merodach. Evil Merodach ruled after Nebuchadnezzar, and Evil Merodach's son Belshazzar ruled after that. He had this party. Babylon was the kingdom. It was the thing at that time. But we know Daniel 5 talks about a hand that wrote on a wall and that left a message on the wall, and that there was something going to happen, and Daniel interpreted that message. So let's skip to this part and see the writing on the wall. We'll look at it in detail later, and see the writing on the wall and see what kingdom came after the kingdom of Babylon. Daniel chapter 5, we're going to read from verse 24 down to verse 31. Daniel chapter 5 from verse 24 to verse 31. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written. Uparsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, Yah hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Parens, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So Daniel told him his kingdom was going to be finished, and it was going to be divided between the Medes and the Persians. And the Median king Darius took the kingdom that night. So following the head of gold, which was Babylon, came the next kingdom, which was the Medes and the Persians. Testing 1, 2, 3. Do you see that? The Medes and the Persians came after Babylon. Everybody see that? Testing 1, 2, 3. So the Media-Persian Empire was an empire ruled by two factions that shared it, Media and Persia. Medes are descendants of Eastern Europe, where we have our Russians today. And yeah, these are your Medes. Okay, so the Medes came after Babylon. Medes and the Persians. Everybody see that? Testing 1, 2, 3. Thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Okay, make sure. Okay, next. What came next? So the Medes and Persians are the silver. What would be the brass? Daniel chapter 8. We're going to study this in detail. Daniel had a vision of a goat and a ram and a goat. And we're going to go right to the interpretation of the ram and the goat, okay? Because it's going to tell us the kingdom that came after the Medes and the Persians, okay? Notice Daniel chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8, verses 19 down to verse 21. Daniel chapter 8, verses 19 down to verse 21. Notice what it says. Daniel chapter 8 from 19 to 21. And he said, behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed the end shall be. The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now, you see, Medes and Persians are followed by Greece. The Medes and Persian Empire are followed by the empire ruled by the Greeks. Testing 1, 2, 3. Are you following me so far? Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay. So you have Babylon, followed by the Medes and the Persians, followed by the Greek Empire. And we know the Greek Empire lasted all the way almost until the time of the Messiah, because Greek became the common language of the pagans and of the earth at the time of the Messiah. They spoke Greek in most all of the known world. So Greece was important. So we can know right now what kingdom came after Greece. Well, let's take a look. Because before we go into that, I want to make sure we remind you. The Greeks represent the brass. So Babylon was the gold. The Medes and the Persians were the silver. And there was thighs of brass. The thighs of brass were the Greek Empire. Now, this next empire that we're going to study is the one that we said goes all the way to the feet. Or should I say Daniel 2 showed us. It goes all the way to the feet. And so the kingdom that we're going to see next is ruling today in 2016. Okay? So let's see what come after the Greek Empire. Okay? The Greek Empire, after the Medes and the Persians, and let's look and see. And for this, let us go to the renewed covenant. The renewed covenant, Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2. I'm going to read from verse 1, Luke chapter 2, down to verse 2 of Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2, verse 1 and 2. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. So a king came up named Caesar Augustus, who had power to declare that the entire earth should be taxed by him. What kingdom did Caesar Augustus rule? Who was ruling? What kingdom? That's right. He was ruling the kingdom of Rome. Rome. So that today there's a ruling power, just like there was then, based in Rome. There's a ruling power based in Rome, and it will remain so until the Most High sets up his kingdom and destroys all the other kingdoms. Let's look at another scripture with regard to that. Luke chapter 3, the next chapter. Luke chapter 3 and verse 1. Luke chapter 3 and verse 1. And in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, Pontius Pilate being governor of Judea, and Herod being tetrarch of Galilee, and his brother Philip tetrarch of Iturea, and the region of Trachonitis, and Licinius, and the tetrarch the tetrarch of Abilene. So now you have Rome is established. It's telling us all the players that were in Rome at the time of the Messiah's ministry beginning at the age of 30. So you had Tiberius Caesar. So just in case you didn't know. So now, at the time of the Messiah, it's a ruler. It's like a governor. It's like a king over a small section, a sub-king, if you will. Like Tiberius Caesar is the king. These people are just rulers, sub-rulers of parts of his kingdom, all subject to him. That's a tetrarch. Yeah, subject to him. So you have Babylon, Media Persia, Greece, and Rome. Why did the Most High pick these four of all the major kingdoms of the earth, of all the many kingdoms that have ruled on the earth? Why did he pick these four? Well, I will tell you, one of the reasons is that these four have influenced all other kingdoms on the earth. Very influential. The Babylonian kingdom, Babylon was of the children of Ham. Okay, the children of Ham. Original Babylonian kingdom was Nimrod. They were big into sun worship, which also other children of Ham, Mizraim in Egypt, also was big into sun worship. They called the sun Ra. Sun worship and the worship of sex worship, fertility and sex, also came from these kingdoms. The Media and the Persian kingdom are influential in that they set up laws. They were a kingdom of laws for sure. And when they set a law, the law could never be changed. It's like a doctrine of infallibility that's prominent now in the Catholic Church. Doctrine of infallibility, papal infallibility. The Greek Empire, the Greeks went down into Egypt, which was Mizraim, into into Kemet, which they changed the name to Alexandria after Alexander the Great. Alexandria, Egypt, was originally Kemet, and they took or stole all the knowledge, ancient knowledge of the Egyptians, and brought it to Greece. And the education system that we now have, education system that confers degrees of philosophy on people, that started, well, that came from the Greeks, and they stole it from the Egyptians. Okay, they stole it from ancient Egypt, and it came from Greece. The masters, the doctorate, the philosophy, the PhDs, these degrees came from the Greek system of education, and the system of education where you start to have theories and philosophy came from Greece. Okay, then of course there is Rome, a ruthless kingdom, that ruled all the others, iron, right? And then you have the Vatican, a ruthless kingdom, behind the scenes in secret, so that you don't even know that it's ruling. You think it's the United States. Rome controls the United States. It's not the Rothschilds, Rockefellers. They all bow to Rome. Rome controls it all. How do you know that? How do I know that? Because all these people fear for their life, and their money cannot protect them from the Jesuit assassins that can be sent after them. Okay, so no, Rome is, the Bible is showing us, Rome is ruling everything behind the scenes. That is a foundational truth that you can carry with you all the way through the book of Revelation, understanding that it is Rome that is behind everything. Okay, the Bible is unveiling to us that it's not something that the people of the earth would believe. It's not something that the people of other religions would believe, and that's okay. The Bible did show us in the book of Revelation that the prophecy is given for the servants of the Most High, so that we are prepared and we're not fooled by what's happening around us. Everything that's going on, the wars in the Middle East, the rulership of the United States of America, everything is from the order of the Vatican, from the orders of Rome. Okay, they control everything. And I use as an example the United States of America. The Roman Catholic powers are already in Congress, the Senate, the House, executive branch, United States, Hollywood. You say, well, what about the Jews? The Jews are the money people for Rome. They're the money people for Rome. Okay, they work together. They're not separate. They have two separate religions, apparently, Judaism and Roman Catholicism, neither of which the Bible says we should be following. There's no such thing as Judaism in the Bible. There's no word Judaism. That's man-made. The word and the religion. It's a derivative of what you see in the broken covenant, but it is not the broken covenant. It's just loosely based on it. Just like the word Christianity is not in the Bible. It's not in the Bible. You will never find the word Christianity in the Bible. And you will only find the word Christian or Christians 3 times in the entire scripture, because it is not the prominent name of the people of the Most High. The prominent name of the disciples of the Most High are not Christian, but disciples and Israelites and Hebrew. This is what you find all through the Bible. You don't find Christian or Christianity. Okay? So Rome rules everything. They have puppets. The United States is one. The so-called Jews, the Ashkenazi Khazars, are the other. They control the Federal Reserve Bank, and all of these bankers that run things in the earth, they're controlled by Rome. Rome has the original central bank. The Vatican has a central bank. It rules all the other central banks. England's central bank, United States central bank, they're all controlled by Rome's central bank. Okay? And money passes through the Vatican all through the earth, and they get fees. They get fees for having money pass through their bank. They don't pay any fees. They receive fees. Okay? So don't let anybody tell you when they start closing these archdioceses that they're poor. It's a front. They have tons and tons of gold. They have gold, not just dollar bills that they let everybody else have. They have real gold, like Fort Knox gold, more than Fort Knox gold. Okay? They run things like that. So we now see who the 4 kingdoms are. Daniel will continually show us these in Daniel chapter 7 and in Daniel chapter 8. He will continually show us about these four empires and how they rule the earth, and what their plans are and what happens with them. We know the end result is that they're going to be destroyed. The Bible did show us that, but let's just review what we got so far from Daniel chapter 2. Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome. Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome. And Rome is the last kingdom when it's divided like miry clay. We're going to talk about that before we get into the next segment. We're going to talk about that. Miry clay and iron. And the stone is the kingdom of the Messiah. Remember what the Messiah told his disciples. Thou art Peter, he said. And upon this rock I will build my church. People think that Peter is the rock. Peter is not the rock. Peter was not the head disciple. The Bible never says that. The rock is the Messiah himself. The Bible says it in a couple of places. That Messiah is the chief cornerstone. That the Messiah is the foundation. He's this stone here in Daniel chapter 2. It is not Peter. The existence of the Roman Catholic Church in part depends on this false doctrine of Peter being the head apostle and him having some sort of apostolic succession, which is why they have these men in fish hats calling themselves Holy Father. They will all stand before the judgment seat of the Messiah in the second resurrection and get what they got coming. Tomorrow, by the grace of the Most High, we will go into Daniel chapter 3 and we'll finish Daniel chapter 2. We'll